Okay. I think people are starting to click in. And let's double check to make sure that this is recording before we go too much farther. I think it is. Great.
It's recording.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Welcome in. Welcome. We're just getting started. We're going to do that thing where we give everybody a minute to sort of, start to come in. I can see all of the numbers of the registrations, all the registrants coming in. Please introduce yourself in the chat as we wait and as we get started. Share your name, your business name, where you're located. If there's any other details you want to share, please do. It's nice to kind of see where everybody is and look for other people who are near you or do similar things. It's fun to watch those things. Hi, everybody. Great, cool. Okay. Well, yeah, let's get started. Let's review the agenda real quick. We're doing our welcomes and introductions right now. I'm Sarah. I work for LISC. We're sort of playing host today for our wonderful presenters that you'll learn and hear more about later. I'm calling in from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So I'm over here on the East Coast. LISC is a nationwide organization that does all kinds of community and economic development, and one of the things we've really been focusing on this year is small business disaster preparedness. We've been working with, there might be another slide for this, but if not, okay, yep. Well, we can go back to review the agenda real quick. Sorry. So yeah, I'll just go through the brief introductions. I'll tell you a little bit about LISC. We'll go through the recovery and resilience framework. We're going to try to make this a little interactive. So yeah, please introduce yourself. There'll be a poll later. If you have questions, please do pop them in the chat. We're monitoring that. We'll try to answer them as best as we can as we go. And if not, if we don't get to your question, we'll be able to follow up with it later. We're going to hear some lessons learned from our presenter today and talk a little bit more about how you all can take those tools and resources to plan for the future. Okay, great. So again, I'm Sarah. I'm a senior program officer here at LISC. LISC is a nationwide organization that does a lot of community development and economic development. And joining me today are my colleagues from Intend, Margot and Michael, and another small business owner you're going to hear from as well, Magaly, and she's going to be able to talk a little bit about her experience with disaster preparedness. Okay, and then this is the part that I wanted to get to. All of this has been, in great partnership with one of our funders, Verizon. They have a platform called Small Business Digital Ready, and there's a number of links in there that we're going to be referencing today. Some links to resources where you can learn more about some of the topics to help with planning for the unexpected, and then other back-end parts of your business as well. And then beyond those three that we're going to talk about today and kind of reference, there's hundreds more. So I encourage everybody to, if you haven't already, check that out, create an account so you can click through the links that we're going to be referencing and also just see what other resources are on there. There's many others related specifically to business continuity, and then tons more about all different kinds of back ends parts of your business. And then there's also live events, peer-to-peer networking, and an opportunity to apply for a grant to help support some of the learnings. This is open until December 10th. So if you sign up and take 2 courses between now and then, you're eligible to apply for a grant. It's a super simple application. It's really just meant to maybe incentivize, if you were thinking about checking this out and creating an account, now is the time to do it. Of course, anytime throughout the year, and next year we offer other similar incentives. So don't feel like you're going to miss out on your one opportunity, but it is kind of a fun thing to do. And we've heard from a lot of small businesses that the grant was great, but the resources was the best part. So definitely do create an account and go in and check that out.
Great. Thanks so much,
Great.
Sarah.
Thank you, Margot. I'm passing it off to you.
Sounds good. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning to those of you that are joining us on the West Coast. My name is Margot Slauson, and I will be the facilitator for today's session. And I'm joined by my colleague, Michael Soto, and he will be co-facilitating in the chat box, sharing resources, websites, answering your questions. So please feel free to ask any questions throughout today's presentation. And if we're not able to address them within the chat box or at the end when we do Q&A, we will certainly address them in our Google group conversation, which we'll share a bit more about at the end of today's webinar. As Sarah shared, we've had 2 sessions prior to today. Today is our 3rd and final part of this Crisis to Continuity series. So I did want to encourage you all, if you weren't able to join us for sessions 1 and 2, please feel free to copy the links that Michael's sharing in the chat box to watch the recordings. Part 1, we presented on preparing your business for the unexpected. So this was kind of a setting the stage to how to create a business continuity plan. And session 2, we addressed internal recovery efforts. Today, we'll be addressing external recovery efforts. So this would be a good one to go back and review just to see how those 2 tie in together. Before we get into our Q&A today with our presenter, I did want to kind of set the stage for what do we mean when we're talking about recovery and resiliency. There's certainly a difference between the 2, and with this series, we wanted to really take the time to be thoughtful in sharing resources in a meaningful way that are related to resiliency so that if and when an unexpected event does happen in your business, that recovery part is less burdensome for you as a business owner because you've already kind of either heard from others about their experience and how they responded, or you've seen some of these best practices, some of these tools and checklists that we're going to share with you, and that you feel just a tiny bit more prepared to reduce the heaviness of that experience. And so just kind of setting that stage for, we want to help support and build up resilient businesses so that in the face of, say, a natural disaster or a cybersecurity attack, you feel even just, a tiny bit more prepared for those recovery efforts. So we would love to hear from you all right now in a poll. We have a couple of online questions that I'm going to present and share our crowdsourced responses to. So if you have your mobile device with you right now and you want to pull up your camera and scan the QR code, you can respond to the poll questions from your mobile device. If you prefer to click the link in the chat box that Michael has shared, you can arrive at the poll through the link in the chat box. And I'm just going to stop my screen share to jump over to our poll. All right. It looks like quite a few of you have been able to join the poll. If I could get a quick confirmation that y'all can see my screen here with our results so far. So our first question, we just want to gauge how many of you on today's call have already experienced an unexpected event that caused a major disruption to your business. So again, this could be anything from a hurricane to flooding to wildfires. It could be a cybersecurity attack. It could be the COVID-19 pandemic, just anything that affected your business that wasn't in your plans. Yeah, as we expected here, the good majority have responded yes, that they have experienced an unexpected event. So certainly as we go through today's presentation, for those of you that have been through this, if there are resources or tips that you want to share with your fellow business owners, we encourage you to do so in the chat box. We certainly would like to hear your voices, your ideas, things that you encountered, so that we can all learn from one another. All right, our next question. We want to get a sense of how many folks on the call sell products, how many folks on the call are service-based businesses, and how many of your businesses are a combination of both products and services, and that will help us to tailor our presentation a little bit more today. Great. I still see some responses coming in. Lots of service-based businesses and some with both a combination of products and services. I'll give one more minute for our responses. Great. Thank you all. Our third question is, we want to just take a moment to hear from you all on a scale rating of strongly disagree to strongly agree. How prepared do you feel in handling supply chain disruptions if a disaster were to occur? So this might be more prominent for those of you that are with product-based businesses, but even our service-based businesses, you might have some vendors that you work with. So if you could just respond to these three questions. The first one is, I have multiple suppliers that I can rely on to continue operations in the event a disaster were to occur. Question two is, I have a buffer of inventory to last through supply chain delays. So that one is really heavy on the product side. But we just want to learn how many of you feel like you have that buffer in place. And then the third one is learning how many of you feel that you have strong relationships with your key suppliers. This is a fun one to see the live results come in because we keep seeing those averages shift. All right. It looks like we got the majority of our respondents, and our average for question one is about a 2.8 out of 5. For question two, about a 2.3 out of 5. And for question three, about a 2.7 out of 5. So thank you all for responding to that. Oop. I jumped ahead. Let me reshare this last question. Okay, our last question here is financial preparedness. If a disaster were to occur tomorrow, how financially prepared do you feel to bring your product or service back to market? So this could be, perhaps you have a good amount in your savings account that you feel could float you through, say, a 6-month period. Perhaps you feel that you're in a good place to be able to access credit, whether that be in the form of a small business loan or a line of credit, or other. And this is on a scale of not prepared to very prepared. And if you have any trouble accessing the poll, feel free to drop your responses in the chat box. Great. So on a scale of 1 to 5, we have an average of 1.9 in terms of financial preparation. So we'll be sure to emphasize some resources and learnings we have on that topic. Jumped up to a 2 there. Great. Well, that concludes our poll session. So I'm going to bring us back to our presentation. Thank you so much for participating in the poll. All right. If I could get a quick thumbs up that y'all can see my screen again for the presentation. Excellent. So again, today we're going to focus on external recovery efforts, but I did want to begin by sharing this business continuity framework. This is a five-step process that we put in a graph form, and as you can see, it's in a cyclical chart, given that these steps are going to repeat themselves throughout the life cycle of your business. And we actually have a business continuity plan that Michael will be sharing in the chat box that you all can reference as a template to customize to your business. And it touches on each of these five steps, starting with identify. This is where we really want to consider the 5 Ps that are critical to operations. So identifying the people, places, providers, processes, and protocols that are critical to your particular business. 2 is assessing, so seeing based on the physical location of your business or the digital nature of your business, what potential threats might your business be at risk for so that you can gauge what types of protections and mitigations you can take. The next one is planning. So again, we've focused heavily on resources and tools to help you develop a plan so that if and when an unexpected event does occur, you have something to turn to help you out in recovery efforts. I really like this exercise one, and it's often a critical step that I've seen left out of other business continuity efforts. And this really, goes back to think about when you were in elementary school and you did fire drills. It's really building that muscle memory with your business, with your employees, so that folks are prepared to find the information they need to put processes into place when disaster strikes. And so doing some exercising of what your plan pans out to be is always really helpful for making sure that it's fresh in people's mind to act on. And then the last step, 5, is review and improve. I would say at least once a year, but certainly if you do experience any kind of unexpected event, you'll want to go back and review your plan and make any tweaks, edits, additions based on what you learned from going through that experience to ensure that your plan is in a good place, that you have all of the protections needed, and then of course you're restarting the cycle once again. So just wanted to set the stage with that framework. And again, if you all want to reference our part 1 and part 2, those provide some great details on this assessing and planning stage. Today, we're going to focus specifically on external recovery efforts. And that has to do with supply chain disruption. So that's why we asked you all kind of where you're at with your key vendors and suppliers and how prepared you feel to come back into business following any kind of crises. We're also going to spend a bit of time at the end talking about external communications, specifically with partners and customers. All right. So I would like to introduce our guest speaker today. This is the meat of our session today is learning from my friend and colleague Magaly Chocano about her experiences. And so Magaly Chocano, she is the CEO of Sweb Development. And Michael's going to share the link to her website in our chat box so you all can learn more about Sweb. They are a full-service digital agency that was founded in 2008. Magaly has a background in broadcast production for the U.S. Hispanic and Latin American markets and leadership roles in international education. She launched Sweb Apps in 2009. This was the first build your own iPhone app platform for small businesses. And under her direction, Sweb has developed over 300 apps for clients like Ford, Tupperware, and Al Jazeera. Known for her creative vision and focus on mobile engagement, Magaly has built a strong community and company culture centered on collaboration, wellness, and growth. and her leadership style has made Sweb a place where innovation thrives and talent stays, which I can certainly speak to. I've known Magaly for quite a while now, and she has some of her core employees still on the team from when she first began. In 2020, the historic building that Magaly purchased and renovated for her company headquarters was destroyed by a fire here in San Antonio, Texas, just 2 weeks prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. So, two crises back to back in a matter of days. These back to back crises pushed Magaly to rethink and rebuild aspects of her business and come back even stronger. And she has graciously accepted our invitation today to join us and share what some of those learnings were, not only from the fire, but from the COVID-19 pandemic. And not just from her own business, but from the community of small businesses that she has friends and colleagues in. And so, without further ado, please welcome Magaly Chocano.
Thank you. What a wonderful introduction. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks, Margot.
Yes, thank you. I want to just start us off, Magaly, with kind of some storytelling, just taking us back to the day of the fire back in 2020. And if you could just tell us a little bit about that experience and walk us through what the immediate aftermath was of the day that the Sweb building caught fire.
Yeah. So it was February 28th of 2020. It was 2 weeks before shutting, the world down from the pandemic. And I was actually at a board meeting one day, and this was an old Texaco building, so impossible to burn, right? I mean, it was like thick brick walls. I had talked to my insurance agent probably 2 months prior and said like, hey, we had completely remodeled it. It's probably time to up the insurance. And he's like, why would you spend the money? That building is never, ever going to go anywhere. It was 100 years old, right? Or close. And I thought, you know what? He's right. I'm not going to do anything. So anyway, it was February 28th and I was at a board meeting. I got a phone call from one of my employees, and he calls me and he's like, hey, the Magaly, like the building is on fire. And I thought, like, my first thought was, oh, it's a little kitchen fire, like just, so I was like, oh, we'll grab the extinguisher. And he's like, no, 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 you need to come down. You don't know what this is. So I grab my car and I'm heading downtown, and I can see this massive plume of black smoke all the way downtown. And I was like, that can't be. That just can't be. And it was.
No.
And 100 firefighters, because the fire was so intense and it had like consumed the building. And my team was luckily safe and nothing happened. It was at 9:30 in the morning. And we just saw it burn to the ground in front of us.
Yeah, that I can't imagine what that must have felt like, especially after all the hard work and heart that you and your team poured into moving into that building and seeing that happen. And we do want to recognize just how devastating these events can be for small business owners, because you really put sweat, blood, and tears into it. And so for any type of disaster to occur and literally watching it burn, I'm sure it was
Yeah,
extremely difficult.
it was really devastating. At the same time, it was like I'm the leader of these 15 humans that are sitting there at the corner of our building trying to figure out like, and what's next, right? So as I was like sobbing, I was trying to get it together to like take, what do we do next? And it was
Right.
now like 11:30 in the morning, and I couldn't think of anything else but to take my team to go have a drink at like the local bar and just like
Yeah.
sit somewhere and just process what had just happened together.
That giving that holding that space for the team members and the employees to just join them together and recognize this is something really heavy, and in this situation where you could physically be together.
Mhm.
I think that exercise is great leadership on your part because your team is looking to you to kind of be the rock and drive the ship and say, okay, what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
Um, could you kind of walk us through, the next day? What were some of the first steps that you took? How did you kind of prioritize what needed to be done?
Yeah, so it was actually a Friday morning. So we went literally to that bar and we asked the bartenders if we could borrow a pen and paper and with our phones. And we literally made lists, right? And so
Mhm.
we gave responsibilities to each one. So everybody was responsible to, you know, call their clients, let them know that everything was okay. Luckily, we had everything on the cloud.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
very, we lost a lot of things, but nothing really client facing that
Yeah.
we couldn't recover.
Mhm.
Um, so we just asked them all for some grace and to give us until Tuesday. And I don't know why I said Tuesday, but I was like, please give us until Tuesday. Like that
Yeah.
was in my head. I was like, by Monday, we're going to be up and running. And I didn't even know where.
Right.
And San Antonio was super good to us. So they came, everybody came to our aid. We actually got phone calls from hundreds of people of how they
Mhm.
could help. And one person gave us an office space for Monday, literally,
Wonderful.
for free for 2 years. It was amazing. And we just wrote lists like, what do we
Yeah.
need? And so so Saturday I went out and I bought the computers and a
Mhm.
printer because I
Yeah.
didn't, I was like, we needed everything.
Right.
At least I knew that we had an office space to go into. And
Yeah.
so on Monday morning, I distributed the new computers. I had made t-shirts for all of us,
Mhm.
rising strong t-shirts, kind of like as a solidarity piece for all of us. I don't
Yeah.
know how I got that done like that same weekend. And we started at 8:30 in the morning on Monday. Basically
Wow.
just, we had our processes and we had our procedures really well, done. And so ultimately we just needed to make sure that all of our clients knew that everything was fine and that we were going to continue.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that was it.
And then fast forward less than 14 days and the COVID-19 pandemic hits and forces business closures across the country. So despite having worked to find a temporary solution for office space, can you touch a little bit on how those closures, what additional hurdles and opportunities that brought to the business?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, well, I never think anything is just because, right? I mean,
Sure.
ultimately the universe is always here to
Yeah,
teach us something.
right.
And I think what was really interesting is that in those 2 weeks, like we really had to learn and decide, like even if we were together in a building, like we had really become remote in a way because
Mhm.
we had to really sort of create these processes because we couldn't just turn around and have something that we had 2 weeks past, right?
Mhm.
So when the pandemic happened, it was really easy for us to kind of just, say, okay, well, we're going to be doing the same, but working from home because this isn't
Right.
our office anyway.
Sure.
Does that make sense? So
Yeah,
psychologically, it wasn't a place that we had connected to.
right.
And, everybody was in absolute paralysis, and we had just gone through that.
Yeah.
So for us, it was actually quite easy to
Yeah.
to to go through that transformation and allowed us to actually be, uh, I think, a beacon of light for a lot of
Mhm.
our friends who were closing their doors, like restaurants and
Sure.
gyms and so on and so forth. So we built actually this movement called In This Together, where we were selling t-shirts and all of those profits giving to the businesses um, that were closed and that needed to
Mhm.
pay rent,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we were able to be really, we made it into a very give back moment for us, which was
Yeah.
really filling. And at the same time, I was really proud at how we had so quickly sort of rebuilt and reassessed everything. And we had been just so, I didn't even have time to grieve really. You know, I grieved
Right.
later. Um, but
Yeah, going straight into action mode. And I wanted to lift up a couple of the points that you touched on was first getting out the word to your customers about giving a little bit of grace and letting them know that you would be in communication with them with updates and letting them know that they could expect to hear from you by a certain date, that Tuesday, which, as you say, was a very quick turnaround, but being confident that your team with your internal meeting had the steps and the tools that they needed. Also, with those physical um, tools that the team needed to perform their jobs, making sure that that was addressed, that they had the laptops that they needed to kind of execute on some of these processes that you all discussed. And then I do want to highlight and applaud what may seem like a small effort in making the t-shirts, but I think that's really an uplifting moment and something that again, the employees are constantly looking to the leader of the group to set the tone and the stage for moving forward. So showing them, this, we are going to rise from this as a team, and we're going to show that spirit, and not only in our own business, but helping our community as well. Um, and so thank you for sharing kind of some of those immediate actions that you put into play in your business. I want to talk a little bit now about some of these external recovery efforts with vendors or supply chain. And, even though Sweb is primarily service-based and cloud-based, I know that you were involved in other product-based businesses, including the athleisure retail business that you started and a restaurant, and you have friends in a lot of uh, physical brick and mortar based businesses. So if you could talk just a little bit about how the pandemic or other crises have affected supply chains and some of the strategies that you executed yourself or that you saw your fellow business owners use to manage delays, shortages, any type of disruptions, if you could touch a little bit on that.
sure. So one thing I wanted to mention before I
Yeah.
I think it's pieced together is that one of the biggest blessings I had during this time was not having to deal with my insurance directly.
Mm,
So luckily, a friend of mine was in the business of helping people like me that need to get their insurance company to pay them back. Um, he he is like that's what he does, right? He's like an adjuster, but like for you.
right.
And I would have gotten nothing for the inside of my building because talking about recovery, I'd never inventoried anything within my building.
Yeah.
I had never, I mean, the only images that I had were just like fun Instagram pictures that I was
Sure.
taking of my building.
Sure.
I had lost hundreds of thousands of dollars
Yeah.
inside of my building that
I remember you had, all of that nice furniture, artwork.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of technology in there, right? That I could have never been able to recover if he wouldn't
Right.
have been part of it. So that's also something as a note is that we don't have to do this alone. And
Yeah.
that dealing with the giants are going to eat you up.
Yeah.
Like find people that that's their expertise. And then I actually had to, I only had to pay 10% of what he made me. He made me 10 times the amount for the inside if I would not have gone with him. So that's something actually that's really important.
That's a great piece to pull up. And I did want to also give a reference to our session 2 recording on the internal recovery efforts. We did spend quite a bit of time talking about insurance, and we also have built out an insurance preparation checklist. So this point that Magaly has brought up regarding, how do you recover all of the physical things that were lost? and not just depending or relying solely on what your insurance provider says that they will give you, and being able to kind of push back and fight for what your business deserves. So I do want to let you all know that we have some great additional resources in session 2.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how about on the supply chain side externally, Magali, what were some of the um, practices that you saw that helped folks get through the pandemic or other disasters?
Yeah, I think, just, well, on one hand, my clothing line, which was an athleisure line, unfortunately, it burned. I had come back from picking up my entire collection and was in the building, and it burned that day. And then 2 weeks later with COVID, I couldn't recover. So that I had to just shut down, unfortunately. But in terms of, there was, I think one of the greatest things that I saw through time, I'm part owner of also of a restaurant, and they became really, really creative.
Yeah.
And so, it was, and I know that this isn't, only this, and I think that, this restaurant, or I think a lot of people were creative in the pandemic, but we
Mhm.
have to be, right? So
Yeah.
it was like they would become little grocery stores during the time that they
Mhm.
couldn't, or they had a food truck, so it became their drive-through. And,
Mhm.
so it was like, how creative can we be during
Mhm.
these times in which, like, even flipping a lot of times, like the way that we do business, right?
Yeah.
um, it was just really incredible how creative we can become, and not and then drive the business in a way that ultimately is going to be much better for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I think highlighting that sometimes when you do the evaluation and you crunch the numbers, having that heart to heart with yourself, that sometimes you just say, this is not the time to continue this. I'm going to do the best thing, financially, emotionally, and close it down. And maybe it's a business that you'll come back to in the future.
Yeah.
With reference to your athleisure line and making that tough call. And then also with, your restaurant, keeping that mindset of being solutions oriented always. That's,
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
feel that's a shared skill amongst entrepreneurs in the first place, and how they can even have the gumption to get started and take that risk. But it really comes into play as a strength and a skill in times of disaster, using that creative thinking and saying, how else can I make a pivot to continue the business, even if it looks a little bit different from the original.
And I think, Margot, a lot of times where that's actually really helpful is seeing other business models.
Yeah,
So like, locked into sort of seeing the only way that our business can do business is this way,
yeah,
right? And disasters like these really make you think very differently. And a way to do that if you're stuck is to look at other business models.
very true.
Mhm.
Yeah, and sharing with your community of other entrepreneurs and learning from them.
Mhm.
Um, to that point, and talking about partnerships, whether it be with other business owners or vendors or distributors, can you talk a little bit about the relationships that your business has and how those came into play during your recovery process, during the pandemic and during post-fire? You said community was a really big piece of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, community where I live, I mean, I was so fortunate. I mean, I was very involved in general.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, we had been very generous as a business, not necessarily giving money, although we also did, but, just giving our time and our thoughts and, through time. And so when it was, when they saw this disaster happen, just everybody came to our aid, which was really incredible. Secondly, I belong to this organization called EO, which is Entrepreneur Organization, and there's a
Mhm.
million of organizations like this, like Vistage and all that kind of stuff. And I just belong to EO, and just the resources inside of
Mhm.
that, right? It's like I mean, that's how I met the guy from the insurance adjuster, right? It was like
Right.
anything that I needed, any idea that I needed, any thoughts that I needed, it was like such a wonderful thing of like, did you think of this? Did you think of this? Did you do this? Did you? And they were really helping me kind of get through the next step.
Yeah.
I was just executing, and also, just kind of like, okay, this is a good idea. This is not, okay, this is not, and just moving
Right.
that forward. But
Yep.
I got so much help from my peers from these organizations that are super helpful.
Yeah, that's a great thing to highlight. And those were relationships that you had been pouring into years and years leading up to the pandemic. So you had that good support community behind you. And I wanted to call out one of the messages in our chat box from Brian. I really like, he makes this point, high quality partners equals high quality and dependable outcomes. So thank you, Brian, for sharing that. Specifically with regard to vendors that you select, such as an insurance agent, perhaps you're going to pay a little bit extra, but really making sure that they're going to be there for you in the times of need, or perhaps it's one of your vendors that provides the raw materials for the product that you make, and they're going to have, even if it's just a tiny bit more flexibility with you on payment terms, or be able to help get you more favorable agreements in those times of disaster. Um, the relationships that you pour into are really going to come into play during these times because it's not something that we can go through alone. So I appreciate highlighting that. I also want to ask about business models. So you were talking, Magali, a bit earlier about looking to alternative types of business models. Um, if you could talk a little bit about the disruptions that occurred and how you came back to still delivering the same service,
Mhm.
but what changed internally in terms of your operations?
Yeah, so gosh, so many things changed, right? It was like, when you're in person, and I know that everyone who might think differently than me, but in person we waste a lot of time because, you're like chit-chatting and then this happened and then the other thing. Where when you're home, you're like, okay, like, you have, so our processes and procedures really changed. And
Mhm.
where we were already very much of a trust culture, we were,
Mhm.
very trusting. I'm a very macro manager. It
Mhm.
had to become even more. So
Yeah.
we actually started building, you know, processes and
Mhm.
using a lot of tools where we can actually see what was happening on a daily basis with a daily huddle as well in the morning to
Yeah.
make sure that all of our points were getting across and
Mm.
creating sort of this unity still within our team, which was so loving and so friendly.
Mhm.
We're all super friends with each other, but now we weren't seeing each other. So
Yeah.
we decided every Wednesday we go to a coffee shop. Whoever wants to go gets to go. So we at least have that feeling. And then every quarter, a retreat, which we'd
Mm.
already been doing. But this time we were like, you know, okay, we're focused on these retreats. They have to be our time of connection.
Mhm.
Or they
Mhm.
were a time of more like work and looking forward and whatever. Now for me, they were more of a time of connection.
Right.
Um, so, all of these different things and figuring out ways for us all to be as productive as possible, giving the
Mhm.
flexibility that everybody deserved. I didn't want people working until 7 o'clock at night because they were home either.
Sure. Yeah.
So just making sure that all of those pieces, and it took a little adjusting over time,
Yeah.
we really are in a great spot now with those
Yeah.
changes.
And being open to those changes, and accepting that oftentimes these disasters are a marker in the business where it's like the business looked one way pre-disaster and looks quite another way post-disaster. And as you have touched on, just always kind of moving the ball forward and challenging the team to how can we do things differently, but keeping that support and communication and knowing that when things are kind of documented and folks have processes to follow, it allows you as the owner to empower your team to work on a more flexible schedule.
Exactly. And I mean, I think that's also been really beneficial for us just because our team is, I mean, I've had team members, I mean, my business is 17 and a half years old, and I have employees that have been with me for 17 and a half
Yeah.
years, you know? So it's like, I think, and now that we're completely remote, I have somebody from California, I have somebody from,
Right.
I have somebody from anywhere. I'm not limited. My brain power is no longer limited by where I live.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to shift our conversation a little bit in these last 15 minutes to communications. So we prepared a one-pager to recap some of the best practices that we're going to talk about, as well as a communications timeline with examples. And Michael's going to share that worksheet in the chat box that we encourage you all to download and customize to your own business. But Magali, given that your company, Sweb, has a focus in external communications, can you talk a little bit about not only some of the external communications that you implemented for Sweb, but maybe some examples from your customers um, during the pandemic or just during any time of crisis or disaster?
Sure. So I always have found that being really clear and with time is the most efficient way to, communicate with people. I think that, clients and even our own internal teams get nervous when there's no clear direction, right? Or a
Mhm.
target. So I always, made sure with my team that whatever we did, we always had to say a time and a date of delivery. But
Yeah.
things can happen, right? So communicating very transparently, because if something did happen, we know that that happened days before, right?
Mm.
So it's like coming back to the client and being able to discuss like, hey, I'm sorry, I know I said I was delivering on Wednesday, but it's not going to make it.
Yeah.
And in our disaster recovery, that was really important for us because we needed the grace. And at the same time, we also couldn't hold on to the victimization of having had a building burned down
Yeah.
for us not to do our work.
Right.
So it was an incredible balance of how we were able to like really clearly communicate, give times and deadlines and moments and things throughout time and really keep to them to make sure that everybody felt safe.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that transparency, even though it feels a little scary, your customers will appreciate it because, they're paying for a service or a product and relying on you. And in some cases, many of you might serve other businesses.
Exactly.
So being as clear and specific as possible. Um, and then if things do change, communicating that and not being afraid and taking that ownership and accountability in your communications. Um, I also want to go back to some of the external communications efforts, like say on social media, that the messaging that you put out there, specifically around during the pandemic to kind of be positive and uplifting. Can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I think, during the pandemic, because, we very specifically did that movement called In This Together. So it was
Mhm.
very easy for us to sort of have a feel-good story
Yeah.
around what was happening. And so what was really beautiful about this idea was it was really kind of this 360, which was we designed these t-shirts, put
Mhm.
them online on a website. People could buy them for $25. 100% of the profits would go
Mhm.
to buying gift cards from a restaurant or a gym or whatever. And then those gift cards from like the restaurant will go to nonprofits with people that were hungry. And
Right.
or like from the gym, they would go to the first responders that, needed an outlet and doing something. So it was this sort of really beautiful give back.
Yeah.
And the feel good piece of helping the community,
Hmm.
helping nonprofits, helping first responders, and what that meant for your team to belong to something like
Yeah.
that,
That's
I mean,
powerful.
was powerful.
Yeah.
So powerful that in 8 weeks we raised $180,000.
Wow. I don't think I ever knew
Yeah,
that goal that you all reached. That's
yeah,
impressive.
yeah. I mean, we thought we were going to, raise 10,000 and we ended up with 180. I mean, it was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
And, something that I think that just is such a proud moment for our
Hmm.
company.
Hmm.
Um, and yes, o sea, that's the way to also communicate out. Like, not only are we here for ourselves in a moment of disaster, but if we can think outside of ourselves in those moments of disaster,
Hmm. Hmm.
they actually make them even more powerful.
Yeah, very much so. I know one of our small business owner speakers from the first session, she talked about how, the community came to her and said, "We want to start a fundraiser on behalf of your business," and being able to share that GoFundMe page on her social media outlets and in her newsletter. Um, really helped the business from a financial standpoint while they were gathering all of their documentations and submissions for grants and loans and all of those um, financial band-aids that take quite a while to process and come to fruition. And so I think it just really emphasizes the importance of if you don't already, having the emails of your customers and starting, a newsletter that you can do through MailChimp or ActiveCampaign or any of these email marketing providers. Having a platform on at least one social media outlet so that you have a way to vocalize to prospective customers or current clients about what's going on and not only in your own business, but being able to share and provide resources for the community and just keeping that positive mindset alive during times of crises. So we've shared a condensed version of best practices in the chat box that we invite you all to download and really customize it to how you see fit for your business. On the back page, we also point out that AI can be a great tool in helping you develop some short and succinct messages that you can share out so you don't feel like you have to spend a ton of time and effort on the messaging, but really using all the channels available to you and being consistent in those updates and transparent. Um, I want to shift now, Magali, just to kind of looking ahead and planning
Mhm.
in the event of an unexpected event in your business.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about any additions that you've made to your business continuity plan or changes that you made, whether it was changing your insurance policy or having alternative suppliers, anything that you went back and tweaked after experiencing the fire?
Yeah. Oof. Probably the first thing I would have done, and I did for my home, was my insurance policy.
Yeah.
We never went back to a building. We're completely remote now, but that's probably the first thing I would have done. It would have been if I would have had a building, I would have everything categorized and just in a catalog, like everything that I owned inside for sure. Um, I would have been a lot more responsible in that way. And not that it's irresponsible, it's just I would have probably, just done it a little bit differently.
Sure.
I think so that like on the very practical level, on the level of like communication with our clients, I think that we did a really good job, and I love that we have that, and now we have a very sort of structured way based on what happened to
Mhm.
us before and how we handled it. So
Yeah.
that was really nice.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think, you know, It's just, and every disaster is different, right?
That's true. It's a live
I
and
don't
learn,
even know.
and many
Yeah,
of these decisions you're making on the spot.
right.
But I know you, in at the onset of this conversation, you did emphasize how nice it was to have a lot of your SOPs already in place and have a lot of your digital backups and things in the cloud so that, you know, in the fire, everything physical was lost. And if you had had all of your files just, you know, on paper, that would have been really hard to make a recovery in the timeline that you did.
That would have been a total disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think like just having placed everything on the cloud and managing everything on the cloud and not allowing any of that to be different was a
mhm,
great
mhm.
choice from the beginning. Obviously, it's a little bit easier to say that and do that with a business like mine, but
Sure.
I think that at this point in today, it's much easier to have all of those elements, you know, to do
Right.
all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, for example, in the restaurant that I'm part owner, they stole the food truck that we had. And
Wow.
so the recovery of that, but luckily we had learned from the other. So we had taken pictures of everything.
Yeah.
We knew years of everything. Like we had taken a little note from our other disaster. And so
Yep.
the insurance, it was much easier to gain that back.
Yeah. Absolutely. And going back to the kind of that framework that we shared in the beginning, it's that cyclical process of once you do experience a disaster for the first time, which really isn't a question about if, but when, um, documenting some of those lessons learned and saying, okay, what can we improve to make this just a little bit easier for when this happens again? And I think digital and backup records in the cloud is a huge part of that, as well as the insurance. And so again, we've shared some of those handouts and resources in the chat box, but I also want to shout out one of the courses that is on the Verizon Small Business Digital Ready account, which is called Planning for the Unexpected, Building Resiliency into Your Business. So if you're looking to get more information and education on this particular topic, please visit the Verizon site. It's completely free to set up an account for the first time, and you can access that course in addition to hundreds of others.
Mhm.
I wanted to end just kind of on an uplifting note, Magali, and ask, you know, what advice would you give to other small business owners about preparing for the possibility of an unexpected event? Um, just one nugget to close us out.
Yeah, I would say, look, if anything were to happen, yes, you can be better prepared for sure, but the most important thing is to stay really open in saying like, okay, this happened, I need to take one step forward because that one other step is going to give us the, reason to take the second step and the third step and the fourth step. I think that staying in the dark side of what could have happened is a lot worse than the tragedy itself.
That is powerful, and certainly recognizes that these are really heavy, burdensome events that could, you know, paralyze most people and I don't know what to do. I can't do anything. I'm gonna have to shut everything down, but giving yourself that um, the grace and also just remembering that you started the business in the first place. And that already is such a tremendous step and a demonstration of the entrepreneurial spirit in creating products and services that make this world a better place to live in. And so going back to your why and saying, you know, I can do this, and what's the first step I'm going to take, and knowing that that's going to build that snowball effect to keep the momentum going.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
I thank you so much, Magali, for sharing your story with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
And thank you to all of our participants. I saw lots of great messages going on in the chat box. I want to invite you all to continue the conversation. We've formed a Google group, which is free to everyone to join. And basically, it's a place where we can have conversations about this topic of business continuity, rebuilding, recovery. Not only will we share today's presentation and the handout, but you'll be able to access the presentation handout and the recordings from all 3 webinars on the Google group. We'll be sending out a post-webinar email to everyone who attended today with those links. They're also in the chat box. And so I wanted to turn it back to Sarah to close us out today. Michael's shared a post-session survey in the chat box, and we would greatly appreciate your time in answering just a few short questions to let us know what you thought of today's topic and other topics that you'd be interested in.
Thank you so much, Margot. Thank you, everybody. We're at time, so I won't keep you. I just want to give a big thank you to everyone. I second, please fill out the post-session survey. Magaly, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's not easy to talk about hard things, but I think that we all really got a lot of, meaningfulness and connection and inspiration and education and everything just out of our brief time today. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all. Have a nice day.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.